This is We Bleed Orange and Black, the podcast for Halloween and horror lovers. Join us as we interview creators, discuss our favorite horror, and share original spooky stories. I'm Jeff C. Carter, and this week we're talking with Jamal Hodge about his new collection, The Dark Between the Twilight. Jamal Hodge is a multi-award-winning filmmaker and writer. He has directed and produced for film, docuseries, and animation. Hodge is an active member of the Horror Writers Association and the Science Fiction Poetry Association, with work appearing in Starline, Space and Time, Penumbric, Speculative Fiction Magazine, and the anthology Chiral Mad 5. Welcome to the show, Jamal.
Hey, it's great to be here, Jeff. Thanks for having me, man.
Icebreaker question, where are you? It seems like you are constantly on the move.
Well, right now I'm in New York City.
You wear a lot of different hats, and I guess my question is, as far as your origin story goes,
Supervillain origin
story, you're going so hard into film, and then you also have this parallel track into writing, and then it might not be fair to say it's another parallel track, but poetry almost seems like a different stream than traditional fiction, a different discipline, travels in its own circles, sort of has its own cutout publications.
Yes, I think culturally, maybe even professionally, that's the case. But spiritually, none of these things are different from each other. They're not really parallel tracks. They're just the track of the storyteller. And the source, underneath all of them, the source is the same, basically manifesting from the unseen into the seen, through the filter of yourself and your own life experience, your own emotions, to influence the emotions and consciousness of other people. So I don't really see it as being different. I feel like it's just like, it's the spirit wearing different clothes to express itself. So you kind of take the same story and then you can manifest it in different forms. So I could tell the same story in the film, in the book, and in a poem, but it just will have a different impact based on the form I put it in.
I guess my question is, did you fall in love with film first? Did you fall in love with poetry first? What was your gateway into those things? Because each one has its own influences, its own journey, its own craft. You have this huge toolbox for all these different mediums.
Why don't you just say that, Jeff? I'm starting that. I said all of that other stuff for nothing, man. I want this whole soliloquy, man, for no reason, bro. But for me, it was just regular prose writing, because in the situation that I grew up in, writing was my escape from a lot of different things. I would be able to write books. They weren't good books, but like in a week or two, in notebooks, straight stream of consciousness. You know what I mean? Yeah, I started out writing short stories and things. So I wrote prose, a scattering of poetry here and there, nothing serious, just more to try to pick up a girl that I liked. I was in junior high school. Actually worked, but ended up not being such a great thing. I didn't really get into poetry hardcore. I was dabbling in like 2017, but then I really got serious during the pandemic. I kind of started getting into film documentaries when I was 15 at DCTV. I was in like a specialized program that was like the #1 film program in America. Got to go to Siberia. Got to live with the Zapatista rebels in Chiapas in Mexico. Got to do all these documentaries, and it kind of set me on that course. But to me, it was all storytelling. It was all like engage in the micro and the macro of people's lives.
Channeling your ideas, and as you said, stream of consciousness directly onto the page. I feel like that is a great way for a poet to start.
Yes.
And then documentary seems like such a rigorous boot camp into the craft and the technique of filmmaking.
Yes.
That seems like the best springboard possible to learn about all the camera packages, the lenses, the lighting, the gear, the setup.
Editing, how to talk to people, how to communicate, how to get things that you need under not opportune conditions. Because the problem with film school when it comes to the film is that you're in a controlled environment where things are very orderly and you always have somebody to save you, but out in the field, you don't. The good thing about documentary is that you get to be the camera, the director, the producer, the editor, all these things at one go. And if you do that for long enough, now you're able to relay that information when you have a crew to your crew, to manage them And you start to learn that post-production, pre-production, and production are all interchangeable in film. Then it is always overlapping. And the same thing I think in writing, because story structure is story structure. There's a way to do story structure. It shifts a little bit in the medium, but there is a wrong way to do story structure. And I don't know if there's a clear right way. There's many right ways, but there's this, distinct wrong ways of doing stuff that we all can agree on. I think being a documentarian helps you with all of that as well, because it helps you just become a better storyteller, which is all this stuff is dependent on.
Does it feel like making documentaries is running with weights on? And then when you get on set, is it like the weights are off and it's much easier because everyone there's a collaborator, you have a shot list, you just have to make your day? No,
Nah, man, it's literally the exact opposite.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite. So like the thing about documentaries is that you have to be so attentive that you lose yourself. It's like dancing. Like when you're really dancing, you're really trained for the dance. So a lot of it is instinctual. Your subconscious mind kind of takes over at a certain point because you already trained stuff into your body and you're flowing. And you get into like this flow state where you're aware but not that aware because you're so focused on what you're doing and you're just feeling. Documentary is like that between you and the subject. When you out there with the camera and you're used to your gear, you just are constantly making all these adjustments and stuff to the point where you don't have time to really think about yourself at all. So it's almost like more peaceful. It's so immersive, it's more peaceful. Film, the hardest thing in life is people, right? Best thing and the worst thing in life is people. So the more people you have, the more problems you have. The more personalities you have to manage, the more things are getting in the way of your vision. It's harder in production film because you have to oversee and manage people's expectations and search for the moments. There's so many different forces pulling on you. But where that shifts is in post, because in post, narrative film becomes a little bit easier. But in documentary, it's way harder because now you really got to find the story, build the structure. It takes way more time. And it's more like writing, like rewriting, next draft, next draft, next draft. Film, you have an overall focus. Obviously, it never lives up to that in the end. When you get to post, you're making a different movie, but you still have a structure that you can follow. There's a roadmap to the end.
Is that analogous to prose versus poetry?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say poems are like making a commercial. And even though a commercial is 30 seconds, and technically a film is like, I don't know, like maybe 90 commercials or 180 commercials, you want to do it by time span. It's a lot easier sometimes to make a long form film or even a short film than it is sometimes to make like a commercial or to make a short film because you have more space to play and to get the ideas across. Same thing like poetry can be a lot harder to write than a short story. For a really good poem, it's difficult and it's not really up to you sometimes in some ways. It's also up to the feeling that you're given by the poetry gods, by the muses.
So Jamal, what is it like to have the number one American poetry release and the number one new horror release in paperback?
It was a brief blip in time, but it did happen.
It happened.
It happened for one quick moment in time.
Yeah.
It felt good. I mean, it just, all these things, awards are cool, but impact is why we do what we do. At least me, I don't just speak for myself. I think the goal is to have the biggest impact you can for the longest amount of time, hopefully well beyond your mortal existence. That's how I gauge it. And those things like that it helps me to know that I'm on the right path and that I'm reaching somebody out there, Sometimes you just don't know until you see it and it touches you. But yeah, I just it felt good. It felt really, really good.
You have described your tone as inspirational darkness.
Yes.
So this is your own term of art. Can you tell us about inspirational darkness?
Well, I mean, look at me, right? I'm dark and I'm inspirational. No, I'm joking, I'm joking. But where it comes from is just that my ultimate thing is to shock people into the realization that everybody else is as alive as you are,
Mm.
which is so obvious that it becomes invisible to us. because we only can experience life through our own consciousness and point of view. But everybody else is having an equal point of view and having an equal experience. My goal is to use darkness with, pain, suffering, death, the things we can't escape while being on this planet, to actually teach us to be more compassionate to each other and have the courage to live authentically, to use darkness to show light.
I think the best horror fiction and nonfiction uses that same philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to take
Uh,
away hope from people so that they understand the value of hope.
mm,
You got to show people suffering and either choosing to die, to sacrifice themselves for a greater good, or something like that, because in real life, authentically, death is inevitable. We can't escape it, no matter what we do. So it matters so much about how we meet it, how we face it. Whether we win or lose is not the point. A lot of horror movies convey that. Because life is a horror movie and a comedy wrapped in one. Really, ultimately. It's really scary as hell, and it's really funny as hell when you sit down and you think about it. So, like, I think the best, the most authentic movies, the medium of horror, of comedy, they could touch on truth in a way that drama even can.
So your collection is divided into 3 parts: A Song of Night, A Black Scream in the Twilight, and A Song of Dawn. How did you come up with that structure?
I guess at the time I was obsessed with like circadian rhythms and natural cycles in nature, and that how like nature's the only perfect system. I feel like anything that we do, if it's in tune with nature's natural cycle with a perfect system, it'll last longer. So when I was thinking about it, I was thinking about my life, and I realized my life and everybody's life, in a sense, is just a blip in time. It's like one day. In the first section, Songs of Night, it was more about the darkness in your mind, which is a lot of it is just fears and delusions and imagination, because most of the time the darkest darkness in your mind is just fantasies in your mind. They're not really happening in reality, but they're shaping your reality. So that's why that section has so many poems that are fantastical, or then they seem like they're from genre. They're very genre oriented. In the second section, well, Black Scream in the Twilight, it was just the scream of my own personal soul, I guess you would say, from my experiences, my shortcomings, my failures, things like that, which are not necessarily bad or good because they shape who you are. So it's about vulnerability. And that's why it's in the middle, because it's neither bad nor good. It just is. And this is the authentic reality of it. And then in the last section, Song of Dawn, it was just more about truths, real truths that I found on my journey, and that way smarter people that I've read and I've experienced have come up with, that I wanted to share with people, because the truth might not make you happy, but it'll set you free.
Mm.
And hopefully it'll help you to find the courage to just be your authentic self. And that's what the journey of the book is. When you combine it all together, it's just literally a metaphor for my journey from abuse and darkness into light and optimism and life. So the will to live and to be of value while you're here.
Would you be willing to read us a few poems from your collection?
Why, of course. Of course. Gather around the fire, kids. No. This is The Great Blue Stomach That Circles the Sun. So the story behind this one is about a suspicion that I have, and it's actually a poem written about my worst suspicion and worst fear, actually. The Great Blue Stomach That Circles the Sun. I cry often in great mewling heaves with the revelation of cyclical doom, the inescapable knowledge of what mortality means for breathing things born within the licking whirlwind. Violence is the architect of historic grandeur. Why then do we pretend the flowers without thorns and little things born will not grow teeth? All devours, life eats life, but propagates itself to keep the feast eternal. Pause to consider. Energy can't be destroyed, just recycled. Energy and matter are the same. The mass of the world does not change with a species extinction. Flesh is given to new forms, new mouths, new stomachs, feast upon feasts. Where, oh, where is God to declare us good? The world is but a stomach. The meaning of life is teeth. One thing, thinking it's many, endlessly digesting itself. The great blue stomach that circles the sun.
I love this poem. I thought it was a great example of cosmic horror and distilling these truths into something that is very easily, pardon the pun, digested. You came up with a lot of these during COVID, right?
Yes. It just came from existential dread.
Yeah.
Over the course of my life, I've had too much time on my hands to just think about shit. And one of the things that I always wonder is just where does the mass of the world go? And it doesn't really go anywhere. So that means things are constantly being recycled, consumed. Like I'm only alive because I've consumed maybe hundreds of thousands of other living beings. Even if I didn't hunt them and kill them, somebody killed them on my behalf and I consumed them. So in a sense, this whole idea of vampirism is the natural law of every living thing on this planet. And nobody thinks about that. But literally, for anything to be alive, something else has to die. It's just really disturbing when you think of it. And yet the world is always full with life. That is so disturbing. So I just wanted to share my pain with everybody else.
I feel like a lot of the poems in Song of Night lament the idea of self and ego and yearn for ego death as a way of stripping away pretense and finding that universal source that we were talking about earlier. Yeah. So, in a weird way, that is that inspirational darkness, that transforming horror into beauty. And I like that in The Great Blue Stomach That Circles the Sun, life goes on long after you're devoured or you decompose and you feed other things who will feed other things. Life continues. And if you just pull your eye away from a microscope, you can see that there is a cycle that goes on.
We're just all in it, man. And there's no way out. So you're part of something bigger, whether you want to be or not.
For me, I think the darkest version of The Great Blue Stomach That Circles the Sun is your poem Alone.
I actually made a movie of this poem. Alone is something that it was a reoccurring experience I think a lot of artists face, but I faced a lot in my life. We all know what it's like to be alone, to be lonely, but you can be both externally and internally lonely. You experience aloneness in a lot of different ways. So I wanted to be vulnerable, open, and share this. Alone. Everyone I love leaves. I cannot trust the promises of lovers or brothers, sisters or friends. Unreasonable my ends, stubborn in my mistrust. Why am I never good enough? At least in death, the promise remains true. Even I can abandon it too. You know, in my life, a lot of times I suffered from the porcupine's dilemma, which is like a curse. And I think a lot of artists deal with this, but it's almost like you want people to get close, but the closer people get to you, the more you hurt them. And then they have to go away. And then you're alone. And then you hate being alone. And then you hate yourself for making them go away. And then other people come and then they get close. And the closer they get, the more they get stung, the deeper the quills go. And then they go away. Then you're alone, but you hate being alone. And then you hate yourself. And then you want to escape yourself, but you can't escape yourself. And then you want to kill yourself so that you can also escape yourself. There was a time when I was like 16 and I was really hyper depressed. I didn't realize how depressed I was. I was depressed for so many years, but I realized I was even depressed. And thank God I didn't have the courage to end myself. But I definitely felt like if something would have took me out, I would have been relieved. You know what I'm saying? Because life had been so unfair and so cruel to me. And I had been unfair and cruel to others in my own mismanagement of my own emotions. That experience is very common, honestly, in different parts of people's lives. You'd be surprised. We don't talk about it like we should. Socially, it's a lot better now than it used to be, especially amongst men who actually need to talk about it the most. because we actually delete ourselves the most. People feel like it's a weakness or stigma around talking about it. Luckily, I haven't felt anything like that after I kind of went on the spiritual journey for 10 years. I kind of never felt anything like that for like the last maybe decade. I haven't felt that. But like before that, I used to feel that urge a lot, especially when I was alone. So I know what it's like where you just don't want to be here anymore. And it's just like people might be around you, but you just feel so alone inside, you know? And like you're saying, a lot of that does have to do with the ego because like I was saying, yeah, sometimes depression can literally be a disease, but most of the time depression is not internal, it's actually external. It's usually about you not liking your status in an environment or being in an environment of abuse where you can't fully express what's in you or who you are. That's what I'm saying. If you don't like who you think you are, everybody has a different version of you in their head. Accept the version that's the most positive that somebody has for you and try to be that for a while around them. If you go to help other people in need, now they just see you as a saint, as somebody who's helping them. You could be that for a while. You could be that person, version of yourself in that environment. Spend more time in that environment. The environment is so important to freeing yourself from depression and loneliness. The other thing is that depression makes the whole world smaller around you. So the whole world becomes about you. So depression in itself is very selfish and self-centered, as weird as that sounds. It's you making yourself a lot bigger in the world than you are, making your pain a lot bigger. Anything that's happened to you has also happened to multi-millions of people. Some of them were able to get past it, some of them weren't, but you get to decide. I just like to talk about this because I suffered from it for a very long time. And one of my missions in life is just to help people find the courage to get out of that.
And you tackled this in film as well, right?
It's a narrative poetry film called Alone that won a few awards. It's only 5 minutes, but I wanted to connect the depression to what happens to families after they lose a child. But so many families divorce from that pain, but nobody talks about that loss. A lot of times when you kill a child, and this one was around, police brutality or losing young men, but you literally kill a family as well. And, it's just a guy suffering with the guilt of not being able to save his son. He loses his wife, he loses everything. He's just alone. And then he succumbs to that darkness and takes his own life. So it was like an anti-suicide film so that people who are going through those experiences can see the end result, the level of pain that you're leaving behind when you do something like that so that they won't ever want to do it.
There's one more poem that I'm going to ask you to read. I thought it was so bleak and beautiful and transformative. And that is your poem, A Gift of Illness.
Yeah, this one was a hard one to write. A gift of illness. The rustle of a sheet. The nurse smiles down at me. I've been put on notice. There is no forever in this form. Skin never deserved my worship. Sickness has made that plain. We become rational in the slow dying. It's in the living where we are less than sane. The steady beeping of machines, the IV in my skin. I will not fade peacefully, unknowing and sudden. I must linger now, take my bow, this heave will deform, but not undone. Deep breaths of the ventilator. Pain loosens lips, grief opens ears, our reasons made plain. Love suddenly seen by the blindness of the stubborn. Why cost my malice? How wasteful, utterly wasteful the time apart. The creak of an opening door, eager footsteps. Beautifully they gather, faces brightened by the memory of my life, shedding tears in honor of the road traveled, the contribution shared. All the wild fears are precious acts of courage left unmet, a dream on the other side of regret. These last days, in a spiritually dead age, are the final religion. Hands intertwined while the level hand of a child gently caresses an ear. Thank the gropes, thank the cough, Thank the shortness of breath. Thank the fading light. Me, the blessed sufferer of failing flesh, caress the gladness by death's own hand to live a lifetime in the length of a breath.
I'm sure there's a story behind that one.
Yeah. Just think about, you see people die and you think, what are they thinking in that moment? What are they experiencing as they're dying? I try to look to my own death and I think about the trivialities, the people that I've cut off, the people that have cut me off, the people who will eventually show up for you in the end when it's all said and done, and how that moment can be so beautiful, to last longer than a lifetime
Mm.
in that singular moment, because time expands or shortens itself based on the state. So for me, I wanted to see if everything was technically a blessing, and from a spiritual standpoint, we chose to come here to be limitless within limitation, because wherever we come from, we're limitless. But here, we came here, we took on flesh for this experience. We chose this experience. And that must mean that on some level, perhaps even the way we die, when dying is a gift. And a lot of people, they just die suddenly in their beds, randomly in accidents, sickness, no matter how horrendous. It gives us time to say goodbye. It gives us time to contemplate our lives, to sum up the totality of who we were and who we are and what we're leaving behind. So in a lot of ways, sometimes people get cancer and they're like, oh my God, I know when I'm going to die or things like that. But at the same time, if you're dying slowly, you still have the ability to affect the lives of the people who love you, that are around you. That's the gift of illness. Some people are just bastards when they were healthy and when they were sick until they died. They just never stopped. They got like strong commitments. But most people, I feel like when they feel their end coming, you'll never meet them at their best more than in those moments.
I think that is a great example of inspirational darkness to end our coverage of the collection. But you have many other irons in the fire.
Yeah, this area of blood, man. I have no idea how this book actually exists. It seemed like it was an impossibility that actually became a possibility. So I'm pretty like psyched for it. The Bestiary of Blood is a book. It's 36 contributors if you count myself. So 35, I would just say. 18 Bram Stoker Award winners, and I think 3 or 4 Lifetime Achievement Award winners, and 2 Grandmasters are in it. It's pretty much a modern day Aesop's Fables meets Sounds of the Lambs with a touch of the Twilight Zone. So, so it's definitely social commentary for the modern age from some of our time's darkest minds. Tim Wagner's in there, Stephen Barnes, Linda Addison, Lee Murray, Angela Yuko Smith, Colleen Anderson, Max Gold. The list just goes on and on and on. So, it's a combination of poems as well, but it's all done through metaphor with animals and wildlife and stuff like that. So it's a very unique book, but it's very powerful and timely. Just coming out by Crystal Lake Entertainment. So I'm really excited.
Awesome. Jamal, where can people find you online?
So people can find me on writerhodge.com. That's writer, Hodge.com. Hodge.com. Instagram, Director H, no space. And on Facebook, yes, I'm old enough for Facebook still. I'll still use that thing. Jamal Hodge, just my name, JamalHodge. You also can find me on Amazon if you're thinking about buying the copy of The Dark Between the Twilight. It's been getting phenomenal reviews. I really tried to cut myself open and share the deepest parts of myself in this debut collection of mine. I'm using me as a sacrificial lamb to hopefully give you some more insights on yourself, because the deeper we look, the more we are the same.
Jamal, thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thank you, Jeff, man. It's a pleasure, man. Thank you for having me.
Please subscribe and follow. Links are in the show notes. You can find me at jeffccarter.com and hit the link to pick up my collection, We Bleed Orange and Black, 31 fun-sized tales for Halloween. Until next time, stay spooktacular.